All right, hello everybody, and welcome to State of Collegiate Esports Part 2. This is the second part of a two-part panel series where we discuss topics in the collegiate esports space, such as building programs, COVID, publisher exclusivity, the future of the space, and we do have a small time bank for a community Q&A. I'm Amanda Demizio. I will be your moderator for this evening. I am currently an operations coordinator working for LeagueSpot. I'm going to pass the ball off to Sergio.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sergio Brack. I'm the director of esports at Ottawa University and also a co-founder of Collegiate.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lydia Pfister. I am the director of esports for the ECAC.
Hi, I'm Jen Hookway. I'm the esports coordinator for SUNY Empire State College in New York.
Hi, I'm Corey Kennedy. I'm the director of esports at Illinois Wesleyan University and a board member for the Illinois High School Esports Association.
Hi, I am Caitlin Tiniente. I'm the esports director here at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. Tiniente.
All right, thank you so much, everybody, for being here on this lovely Friday evening. In New York, we have temperatures of 70 currently, so it's great, being inside and not outside sometimes, so you don't have to sweat. But we're going to get right into it. This first question is going to be directed for Caitlin and Lydia. Tell us more about how you got involved with your program and a little bit about more of your day-to-day responsibilities. So, Caitlin, if you want to start us off.
Oh, sure. So how I got involved with my current role, at the time, early 2020, I had been working contract jobs for Collegiate Star League and Super League Gaming. And I'd gotten to a point in my life where I wanted something a little more stable. And it just so happened to be the exact same time that St. Mary's was looking to hire a head esports coach. So I went ahead and applied. The first interview that I had with our athletic director, I was immediately impressed. Impressed with his transparency, impressed with his vision for the program and just his passion for competition and athletics and student engagement in general. So that's what really sold me on this role. Day to day, I'm sure everyone can kind of agree with this, that every single day is a little bit different. But when I kind of narrow it down as to what is it that I really do here, yes, every day involves esports, but more than that, it really is relationship building at every level. Building relationships with my athletes, my student staff, my coaching staff, the athletics department, other departments on campus, other stakeholders, sponsors, the community at large, third parties. I mean, really everything that I do is about relationship building and fostering those relationships, and just doing things that are meaningful and impactful, but also always tie back into our larger mission and what it is that we're trying to achieve. So it's hard to say what it is that I do every single day, but relationship building, whether it's working with a team or a student, working with our business school. I mean, recently for homecoming, we ran this amazing Super Smash Bros. Tournament on campus to like be the tail end of homecoming. So, that's kind of part of the job.
Yeah, that's awesome. Community building is definitely one of the biggest things in grassroots esports, and definitely at a college and a local level. Lydia, since you are the director for the ECAC esports, how does your how did you get involved with that sort of aspect with the ECAC, from them coming from traditional sports, and with your role in the esports sector of the ECAC, your day-to-day responsibilities and how you operate with them?
Yeah, so in the spring of 2019, I was in my last semester of grad school, and our current partner now, CSMG, brought in Dan Coonan, who is our commissioner, to talk about esports. And this is when we had just started diving into esports, and we had only about 15 schools interested in joining us, and it really stuck with me. So I kept in close contact with him. I went to an empowerment series that they had at the offices and said that, I would love to intern and work for you. And he absolutely, open arms accepted me. And it's been really history ever since. And that year, it's funny because now today we're in Albany, New York at GamerCon. And I interned in 2019. This was like my first event. So it's amazing to see how it's all unfolded. And day to day, I can agree with Caitlin that every day is different. There's so many responsibilities that I have, from, building relationships to league adminning, game day operations, league operations, social media, working with our production and broadcast team. So every day is different, and the challenges every day are unique and awesome. I love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I come actually from playing in the ECAC, so it's awesome to see where it has started and where it is now, definitely on like the backhand side. Continuing on with program building, still directed at Caitlin and Lydia. So Caitlin, what is the biggest challenge you faced while growing your program at the university?
I think our biggest challenge early on was not only building the program, but establishing what is our mission and what are our goals. And more than that, it's not just what it is we're about, but building the framework for how we get there, turning those ideals and the things that we care about into real world action. And I think one of the things that we talk about a lot, one of the difficult conversations we have within our program, is about inclusivity and representation and diversity. And it's something that we get asked a lot about, and we're more than happy to talk about it. And at the end of the day, it really was about being intentional about representation, being intentional about having these difficult conversations up front, and then having difficult conversations of, how do we do these things? An example that I think gets brought up sometimes is mental health awareness in esports. And maybe from my perspective, I see a lot of emphasis on the awareness part, but not necessarily the action part. And so I took that to heart, and I'm like, you know what? Anything that we say we're about, let's figure out how to get there. Let's start mapping out the stepping stones and be realistic that we know we're not going to solve all the problems overnight, but as long as we're intentionally taking steps to bridge a gap, I think we're in the right direction. So turning goals into action, and with that, another challenge that we faced a lot was education, and more so educating our student body, the administration on campus, our local community at large. And with that challenge, the thing that we always come back to is building bridges with more people, inviting more people into the fold. If someone ever says, "Oh, I could never be in esports, I'm not a, pro player, I could never do that," then it's like, well, how about some practice? How about, join us for a game night? How about, if your passion isn't playing Valorant for 20 hours a day, that's fine. Are you interested in production? Are you interested in social media? Like, how do we incorporate more people? And not just students. I mean, a big part of the relationship building is bringing other people on campus into the fold. A great example is our Dean of Students, Dean Bessler, who joined us last year for homecoming for a Fall Guys game night. He had never played it before, but he joined us for a stream, talked about everything that his office does, and that's another example of just a bridge we're building on campus to get more students and admins invested in esports, and that it's more than just the video games. So those are probably the two big challenges that we faced early on.
Yeah, I love it. And I love getting more people involved, especially outside of the player aspect, more backhand production, anything on that level as well. I really love that. Lydia, biggest challenges you face while growing the program, especially at the massive level that the ECAC is at.
Yeah, so I would say, the growing pains and the growth pains that we've had have been essentially, they've been a key turning point in us and where we're at today. I think that we grew so fast without even realizing, and listening to our members and our coaches and the feedback, saying, hey, like, you guys have something here. You guys need to brand it more officially. And that's when, we partnered with LeagueSpot, and they really came in and saved a lot of time for us. And yeah, it's been really great. So I would say that, that we've just grown so much that sometimes we are like, how do we work with this growth? And I think that we've done a great job in handling that and listening to our members, and really help navigating us in the right direction for the best competitive experience for our players.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you for that. So COVID is a hot button topic. Everybody knows the effects that we've all experienced from the pandemic over the last 2 years. So Cora and Sergio, our entire industry in the world has been affected by COVID. How has COVID impacted your programs? Have they done better, worse? Like, what are your takes on that?
I'll go first in this, I guess.
Yeah.
So COVID didn't impact our recruiting numbers that much. Recruiting was more or less similar. 12 to 15 is kind of the goal every year. COVID for us really impacted our ability to host in-person events, because something we do quite frequently is host what's called Smash the Titans, which is initially concepted as a once a semester big Smash event. Well, it hasn't run for 2 years now. We just hosted our first one in 2 years, like 2 weeks ago. And so hosting big events like that, or game nights, or watch parties, or whatever, got put on hold. For us, it was weird because we have a standalone dedicated facility for esports at Wesleyan. It's my own building. It's kind of weird. And we couldn't actually use it. In most of the 2020 to 2021 school year, the building had literally just opened, and it was sat more or less empty. It was still used here and there, but it wasn't as full as it could be. And so the start of this school year, administration backed off COVID restrictions. We had people back in person. Then when COVID spiked on campus, it was taken back to remote. And then start second semester, we had to go remote for the first 2 weeks, or optional remote kind of hybrid thing. And so we went, okay, let's put the facility back into only required personnel or students who only use it. And it was weird because something I didn't realize with esports based on campus is students don't just game there. A lot of them do classes from there, or for some students, it's their only computer they have. Like, some of my players do all their schoolwork from our facility. And so when I put that announcement, I got messages from players, hey, can I still get in even though it's closed? Because that's where I do my schoolwork. And so that's the weird COVID impact I've seen, is people realizing how dependent they are on university resources, I guess, and our lack of ability to provide them in person. And then event hosting is just an utter nightmare with COVID happening. And You got to check vaccination status and IDs and records and masks and all these things. And so it gets really annoying to try to host these things when you have to add another layer of red tape on top of it.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, so for me, I could sort of answer this from two ways, just because I was actually still a student when COVID first hit, and so I was still at Ole Miss, running that student-led program, and I remember the biggest thing for us was that a lot of these student-led programs at big Power Five schools are very dependent on student engagement and participation to even get a look from their administrations and things like that. So in a way, while my current position at Ottawa probably wouldn't exist without COVID, in that same vein, I feel like Ole Miss was held back because of COVID, because there was no, gauge of student engagement beyond like Discord numbers and things like that. And even still, we were trying to host things like game nights through Discord, or movie nights through Discord. But ultimately, that's not the same as being able to actively see each other. And the reason I love talking about this in particular is because a lot of times, people think, oh, you gamers, like COVID didn't do anything to you, like you're fine, you this is your domain. And like I said, in a way, that definitely is the truth, right? Like I said before, I think the athletic department at Ottawa was looking for something, to sort of bolster engagement and market their university a little bit more. Esports just so happened to be that, right? Because we could still compete regardless of COVID, whereas the other sports at the time really couldn't. And so I think, ultimately, it has pros and cons based on your university and your situation. Like I said, from the student-led perspective, I think it definitely hurt a lot of them, because a lot of those programs rely on grassroots, events that they put on, whether it be Smash Weeklies or, just community events on campus to garner more interest. So that definitely took a toll. But there's also, on the flip side of that, an abundance of private schools that said, oh, we want to do esports now because you all can still compete regardless of circumstances. So I definitely think it was a blessing and a curse for the space, for sure.
Definitely. Special shout out to all my class of 2020 and 2021 grads who graduated throughout this pandemic. Love y'all. So zooming out of the program, like of your individual program, what impact has COVID had on esports as a whole? Gonna send this off to Jen and Lydia. So Jen, start us off, since you're more involved in the college scene, and you have you're at a school, obviously, but you're also your school is completely remote. Is that correct?
Yes. So SUNY Empire is very unique in the space in that we do have some in-person, what we call residencies, which are like 3 or 4 weekends where students will get together and do activities. But I want to say like 95% of our students are completely online. So when COVID happened, pre-COVID, we were trying to get esports together. And then when COVID happened, the SUNY school chancellor said, hey, we're going to have a big event. It's like a fundraising thing. And then the winners of this esports thing is going to get, basically emergency funding towards that, whatever school wins. So all of a sudden, SUNY Empire went from being like, esports to, oh, esports. Okay, cool. So COVID was great for my program personally, which is, it sounds really bad to say. But we kind of took advantage of the bad situation and flipped it around. And, our school has overall been very supportive of it. We had a staff versus students Mario Kart event this fall that was a ton of fun. The staff won somehow. I don't know how, because a lot of us had really not played Mario Kart before. I'm going to call it a lot of luck on that. And so that was great just to see the support there. But it is, on the flip side, I know from experience being the president of the gaming club at SUNY Poly, and also kind of watching how SUNY Poly does things, because they're rock stars in the space as far as SUNY schools go. They're putting together a Frag Fest for the first time, which is a big LAN party. Frag Fest is a 3-4 day LAN party that they do every semester. Well, they're putting that together again for the first time in years. And like Sergio mentioned, it's really hard now with COVID restrictions. They want to do it in the fall, they couldn't. Now they're finally getting it in the spring. But comparing my experiences in person versus online, it's a lot easier for someone to say, hey, I want to get involved in esports, and to send an email and join the Discord. But it's a lot harder to track them down if they decide to ghost or if they don't have 100% commitment. So in some ways it requires more work on my part as a coordinator to keep on top of these completely online students. I don't see them every week, at a club meeting or at a team meeting or at practice. I have to hunt them down individually. And, if you've got limited hours, it's a lot of stress for those of us that are doing it part-time. So a lot like Sergio said, there's a lot of good side and a lot of bad side on a local level where, you kind of have to pick and choose your battles and figure out what works best for you and your program.
Definitely. Thank you for that. And thank you for this perspective of having this unique program and like this unique college experience that people have at Empire. Lydia, on the flip side, the ECAC COVID impact, since the ECAC has HV GamerCon, just this weekend, that's an in-person public event. How has COVID impact the collegiate esports in a whole, and from your experience working with this program?
Yeah, it's been good and bad. As you guys said, a blessing and a curse. Our traditional athletics, when COVID hit, they shut down. It all stopped and came to a halt. So we did not have anything for traditional athletics going on. But in the same sense, we saw a spike in esports and schools reaching out. Their Madden players that played football are interested now in playing Madden, and basketball players. So there's definitely a great connection there. And we saw a great rise in our sport titles as well as just across the board with schools being interested. But yeah, it's been it was a hard time for a lot of schools with budgets and everything getting cut in the financial piece that they had to take in the hardship. And we've worked with schools throughout all of that and working with, during competition time. So the season still ran, we still operated. When it first hit, we stopped everything and we did a couple community game nights, which was great. And then we picked back up. But we still saw kind of a difficult time for schools being able to get into their arenas on campus as their schools were all remote. So we worked hand in hand with a lot of our schools to help them play remote if they were, they were able to or they weren't able to. So we navigated through that. And now, our in-person events obviously stopped as well. We were planning to have HV GamerCon, 2 years ago, but it went virtual, which was great. It still worked out, and it was a great event online. So we're excited to be here today where we're at now.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. So another thing that's a popular topic in the space is about publisher exclusivity. This may not directly affect some collegiate levels at a local level, but we have publishers and companies that are really restrictive of who can use their IPs and who can who can host certain events. So Sergio, publisher exclusivity is a major topic across the board. What is your stance on this idea of publisher exclusivity, like one company owning the right to hold this game event?
Yeah, I think, to put it plain and simple, I'm sure I echo a lot of people when I say it's stupid. That's the biggest, the best word I think to use for it. So when we, started the initial process of getting College COD started, that was a conversation we had. Are we wanting to partner with Activision for the resources? Are we wanting to be the only entity to do, collegiate Call of Duty? And the answer for us was no, because, our league might not be a good fit for people, whether it be, this is the first year we haven't had like an entry fee, right? So back then, though, if it wasn't accessible, we wanted people to be able to find an alternative. If the level of competition wasn't up to par with what people wanted, we wanted to be able to have another alternative. And I think ultimately, if you're seeking exclusivity within a particular title, for your league operations, then you're afraid of competition and your product probably isn't as good as you think it is. And I think, as a whole, it doesn't really, in collegiate, we have the benefit of, we have so many different entities that we can compete in, right? You look at NECC, you look at ECAC, you look at all these different entities that put on multiple titles that we can compete in. So, something that my teams are competing in, Cora at Illinois Wesleyan, it might be playing in something completely different. And I love that about collegiate. Whereas in the high school space, which is ultimately where this affected the most, right? They don't have that luxury. So I've seen numerous tweets within the past few months of players that I've talked to personally that said, yeah, I just don't know. I lost my passion for high school esports because of how it's being ran through certain entities right now. And I think ultimately, it's not for the benefit of the students. There's literally zero argument that anybody could give me that will make me believe that, seeking exclusivity is for the students. And it's ultimately hurting the space as a whole, I think.
Definitely. I do personally agree with that. I think having esports be as accessible as possible is how the industry is going to expand and grow. Cora, what's an example of these types of deals impacting your program or students? I know you have experience in the high school space, so if you want to speak on that, or if you want to speak with you running events, whatever you feel like, and if anybody else has any personal experience they want to jump into, I'm all ears.
So can I call out companies, or I have to keep them nameless?
I don't think do you really want a viral tweet? Do you want
he's blocked me and unblocked me 8 times.
Same.
I'm actually going for a 9th today because I found out he unblocked me today. So I'm going for a 9th. So I run high school esports. I ran a high school program for 3 years. I'm a director for the Illinois High School Esports Association. I TO'd for them for 18 tournaments, casted, broadcast, TOing, coaching all at the same time. And League of Legends, the high school space, is dead. Like, flat out, the League of Legends exclusivity deal with Play Versus, which I think lapsed this year, those 2 years killed most interest that high school teams have in esports for League of Legends at the high school level, because the Play Versus deal just ruined things. And the real issue was Play Versus running a subpar tournament with larger stakes, but yet no administrative backing, and so the tournament quality was just very poor. And there's many teams that I know of that have just stopped playing. Our numbers in IHSCA for League of Legends, we do like some weekend tournament kind of format to go around the restrictions with some loopholes that are Riot approved. There's a loophole to their clause that's Riot approved. I don't ask about it. And so they're having this huge fit about it because we're still running tournaments, but they have their exclusivity rights to it. But teams have just fallen off the map for that. Players have fallen off. Players have lost interest entirely. Overwatch having the same deal with Blizzard. Rocket League just canceled all in-person events. The Rocket League Psyonix developer has canceled all in-person events, and we're trying to host so some state athletics organizations for high school are now getting involved in esports. So not just esports orgs, but like the traditional athletics, like the guys who do football. So for Illinois, we have the IHSA. They're now doubting whether they can run their Rocket League state finals here at the end of April because of the new Psyonix deal. Fortnite, you can't call it a championship because of the rules they have with Play Versus. 2K is not exclusively Play Versus, and IHSA is running that. Smash, you can't call it certain things because Nintendo won't allow you to call it certain things. And so all of these deals are just hurting the space because it's making the barrier to entry for high schools leagues that are not multi-million-dollar companies run by people who don't want the best of the students. It's making them the only people who can do it. Whereas the teacher-run state leagues, especially at the high school level, are the ones that have the most impact on students and are most responsive to student feedback. At Collegiate, Play Versus bailed out of Collegiate entirely, which I think pulled most Fortnite competition. My knowledge, most Fortnite competition's gone now because Play Versus was the only provider. And there's like weeklies and what's it called? DreamHack. But that's about it. And so all these deals are making the scene much more complicated than it has to be. Because we already know, like, all of us can list off like 20 acronyms for league names. And the idea we can condense all those into one is not really future facing for esports as a whole, because the industry is very splintered and has a lot of groups who can do a lot of things separately and better than each other. And so offering competition, like you said, Sergio, is the better way to do it, of letting the leagues stand for their own. So, sorry, long rant. I have very strong feelings about exclusivity because it is somewhat ruining the high school space and making the collegiate space more convoluted than it already is.
Listen, I agree. Like, okay, spin it back. If say the high school space is getting affected this much, what is the output to collegiate? Not, directly, but in, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Is like the collegiate scene impacted in any way from like this exclusivity? If high schoolers are getting turned away at their level, are they even going to like look into it for the future?
So it's making the collegiate space much more, I think, elitist in my mind, because the only people who can then go to collegiate are those who are absolute grinders and play amateur. Whereas there's no one who can be somewhat casual or semi grindy in high school and then get onto a B team at a university and work their way up. B teams may stop being a thing because you're not going to find players for it, or your B teams will be like gold level. And so finding B team players will be especially difficult, as well as students who would have found a path to college through esports are just giving up. I can personally name 4 Rocket League players from my old high school program who've just stopped playing because it's not worth it. And that's Rocket League, and Rocket League is a lot of stuff. League of Legends even worse. My league team last year played 5 matches. That's it. The entire year they played 5 matches. They trained for an entire year for that because of the exclusivity deal. And so it's the motivating players is the biggest challenge right now. And the only place you're going to find motivated players is amateur at this point.
Yeah, and I think, to add on to that, I love that Cora touched on how it's killing the League of Legends high school scene. Every single one of my League of Legends players is older than me. I love talking to high school students that, want to pursue collegiate. And in particular, I think the 2 titles I see it the most in that it's killing it is League and definitely Overwatch. I just think there's not a lot of young talent coming out of it anymore because most of them have given up, but they don't see an avenue for me. I can't even, go to a university and play on an academy team like Cora said, because just plain and simple, the only people we're looking at is people that play proving grounds or playing at things like UPL, at a young age and things like that. So ultimately, I think it's already affecting collegiate esports in terms of recruitment and things like that, because we just don't have the young talent to, bolster and to put on the forefront and show that, this is actually a gateway through League of Legends throughout your high school career. You can go to college for it. When in actuality, most of the top, League of Legends programs you see right now don't really have high school talent, that just graduated and is making that transition.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's important to look at the scope in that regard because collegiate is where we're at right now. So that's that's our jobs and that's our focus. But it's interesting to see how little impacts these decisions that company makes can eventually hurt our positions as well. So turning back to all this, if you could snap your fingers and create an ideal publisher relationship for the scholastics world, what would it look like? This is going to be directed at Sergio and Lydia. So whichever one wants to take it first.
I would say if I had to give probably my favorite publisher backing and relationship with the league right now, it's probably CCA and what Psyonix does with CRO. I think if you look at it from their stream production to the internship opportunities they give students, in collegiate, all the way down to hosting a CRO Worlds LAN and expanding collegiate beyond just North America at this point, I think is absolutely amazing. And I think the opportunities that they provide to students, I've seen students own personal platforms bolster tremendously just from competing in CRL. And I've seen universities turn heads because people are competing in front of 40,000 people on a CRL stream. And it's so exciting, so accessible for every school that wants to join in. The schools that can't qualify for CRL, they get to play in CCA and still have opportunities for scholarship prizing and things like that. So ultimately, I think, CCA/Ionic/CRL is really an entity that, I even look up to in collegiate. And I think they're doing an absolutely outstanding job in helping us further the collegiate Rocket League scene.
Definitely. I agree definitely with that. Just piggybacking off of that, I do think that the more opportunities that these publishers can create, like Rocket League is, internship opportunities, job opportunities outside of competing, is super great. And I think that, the more direction they take with that and providing more opportunities, the competition is great. And I love seeing everybody compete. And, the scholarship as well, providing scholarship for students is also great as well. So seeing more of that and less, restrictions on, how many number of teams that can compete, and just capping, schools and and TOs and leagues like us on the number of teams that can compete in a season or when they can compete, either in the fall or the springtime. Just, pulling the reins off of that would be great.
Sweet. Thank you so much. So I do want to open up the next question to everybody. Where do you see collegiate esports heading in the next 3 to 5 years? It could be your program directly, or it can be the space entirely. Whatever you think the esports space is heading in collegiate level, let me know. I'm going to start off with Caitlin.
I mean, that's hard to say. I think a lot of what I'm about to say is more wishful thinking. But for me, I feel like we're going to continue to see more buy-in at the college level. Where varsity esports programs live, I think will vary. I mean, some live within student life, some live within athletics, some live in other areas on campuses. So definitely more buy-in. What I'd like to see is more bridges built between colleges and high schools and just generally K through 12. And that can look like a lot of different things. More things I expect to see in the next coming years is programs expanding their coaching roster. So not just having one head coach do 110 things every single day, 365, but having your head coach, your director of esports, and your coaching staff. And to be a little bit more specific, like I do expect to see more like head Rocket League coaches, head Valorant coaches, like very specific, more things that, and this one might be part of wishful thinking, is more paid student opportunities. So not just grad assistants, but more work studies. Right now at St. Mary's, we do participate in the federal work study program, and we have 3 esports work studies that work within the program. I want to see that everywhere on college campuses. And more than just the work study, but also paid for the work that they do, because a lot of students work in our program, and we feel that it's very, very important and necessary to pay them for that work. For example, our esports broadcast and production team, they get paid out of our athletics game day operation budget. So they're getting paid as if they were a commentator for baseball or basketball, things like that. And I think big picture wise, I want to see just more innovation and creativity and programs taking risks and figuring out new ways to accomplish things. Specifically around scholarships, I would like to see more innovation around how do we award scholarships? What are the amounts? Are they merit-based? Are they academic-based? Are they, incentives? And another thing that I think more programs are going to start doing is bringing more non-esports endemic people on board to get those different perspectives, to get that business sense that maybe someone or the program doesn't have yet, bringing on people who are skilled in just anything and everything to make more well-rounded and welcoming programs. I know that's a lot, and it's half like what I think will happen and half wishful thinking, but 3 to 5 years, like that's what I'd like to see.
Sweet. Thank you so much. That is, I do appreciate the wishful thinking, because, with a little bit of thinking, it's possible. You just got to create the right energy, and then anything is possible. I'm going to pass the ball to Cora. Where do you see collegiate sports heading?
So if Darby's watching, he's going to love this. I see collegiate sports kind of splintering into different subsets, I guess, where there's the competitive and winning focused programs and winning comes first programs, and the ones who are more for student experience and not just focus on competition. So whenever I talk with Garvey, especially about this, he talked 3 C's of competition, community, and career. And I can see programs diverting away from competition as the primary focus and being more of a community or career organizer, where community-wise, you can be community organizations of events, get-togethers, watch parties, whatever it may be, and giving students opportunities to just create what they want. And then career-wise, giving students, like Caitlin said, the student employment opportunities. I have 14 student workers. I want more because I want to do less things. And so I think we all want that. And so getting students just involved more and doing more career-oriented things, I think is a really big focus that'll be good for the space as a whole. And so looking at the space, I think splintering into a very clear-cut, and League of Legends has this very much so, of the clear-cut top competitive programs. But I think we're going to see it in all titles. We're going to see programs splinter into, here's our competitive set of programs, then here's the community and career-oriented set of programs, and those become two more separate groups. And then meanwhile, looking at the pipeline from high school to collegiate, because I have to talk about that, I also want to see collegiate programs like Caitlin said getting more involved with the high school space. I'm not saying they have to run the show for them, but I'm saying they should get involved and reach out and build connections, because virtually every collegiate program I know has at least one high school in town who does esports. And so something I'm pushing my players to do, and we're going to get going pretty soon, hopefully, is getting students to guest coach or community service coach to the college or the high school teams, or like community college teams in town, because we don't play the same division as the community college on the street. We don't touch the same things, so coaching them wouldn't kill us. And some of the players might transfer to us eventually. It's a win-win. And so it's building a pipeline for the college, as well as providing benefits and bonuses to the spaces that are lower tiers than them. But a rising tide raises all ships, and I think if more programs see that mindset of helping everyone else also helps you, we're going to see a better space as a whole.
Thank you so much. Jen, talk to me. Where do you see collegiate esports going in 3 to 5 years? It could be either your program or since your program is tell me a little bit more, like your program, is it a little bit more casual? Is it a little more competitive, especially with the type of players you have being, you know, a little bit more remote? Like, where do you see your program going?
We're very much in our infancy right now, and it's one of those things where it's like I look at your guys' programs and I'm just like, all right, I got to take some notes here because this is where we want to be in 3 to 5 years. You know, we don't have any student workers. I'm part-time. My primary job is a web developer. I get 4 hours a week to run my program. And the thing is, I think that's the bulk of esports programs. I think some of the times, like these top schools, including some of the folks in this conversation, forget that the majority of us are not at your level yet. And we're not going to be at your level for 3 to 5 years or more. You know, so I look at it as like in 3 to 5 years, my wish is that more of us are more on the level of athletics as equal operators, not necessarily under them, not necessarily as like the redheaded stepchild, which it happens. I mean, a lot of schools have to fight athletics to use their space, to use their resources. They view us as an entity that is to be fought against as opposed to somebody to partner with. And we have the same goals. We want more students to represent us. We want more students involved. Like, we want students that are prideful in competition. And you know, it's a way to, you know, kind of shake hands together and say, yes, we're working towards the same thing in like this, but a slightly different space. So for my program in particular is, you know, I'd love for, you know, if not me, then someone to have, you know, a more full-time role to be able to recruit students into it, to be able to reach out to students more individually. There are so many students that fall through the cracks because we can't dedicate the time to tracking students more individually, because, you know, I have between 30 and 50 students that I have to keep track of, you know, every week. And I think if I had more time, or if people in my position had more time, we could easily double that number, but we just don't have the resources. So I'd love to see more buy-in from schools, and, you know, if not, you know, one person full-time, then maybe a couple people part-time working on it. Definitely the work study that was mentioned, because some of the stuff that I do could be not offloaded to students, because it makes it sound like, oh, well, here, you do this and I don't have to do it. But, you know, stuff that I know students are passionate about. You know, I've got one student that you guys have seen them makes killer emojis for the Discord. I'm big about paying artists. You know how much I want to pay the student for all of the emojis that she made for us? Like, that's free advertising for the school, and I want to turn it into paid advertising for the school. And she could easily, you know, put out stuff on our social media and like let's harness all of the excitement that our students have that we're not yet. So yeah, I think the bulk of esports in the next 3 to 5 years is going to kind of go from this sort of casual space into a semi-professional space, which means that those of you who are currently semi-professional will then become more professional. And as someone mentioned earlier, was like the rising waters kind of thing. It's like I think everyone's going to be moving up in the space, just at different levels.
Thank you so much for that, Jen. Sergio, especially with College COD, where do you see, like, regardless of College COD or not, the esports space, where do you see it heading in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I heavily agree with Cora in the aspect of, I think, ultimately we see so many programs and so many new directors and head coaches that join the space and think, okay, I immediately have to be the next Maryville. What kind of scholarships can I give? What kind of players can I pull to be the next Maryville University? I want to win everything. I don't want it to be a question. And I think ultimately, there's definitely room for that, right? There's definitely players that you talk to that's their goal. They want to be the most competitive, and the best program that they can be from a competitive standpoint. But you have so many students that are just looking for a sense of community, on your campus, or just need somebody to lean on, and somebody to just play casual games with. And I think ultimately there isn't a program out there right now that's doing every single thing correctly. And every single thing, in the best interests that they possibly could, maybe for their students. And I think it's all, we're all still learning. And I think ultimately it's going to come to a point where, once again, like Cora said, you start to differentiate, those programs. Maybe I go to St. Mary and, for the community. Maybe I go to Illinois Wesleyan for the career opportunities and internships that they provide. Maybe I go to SUNY Empire because they're, one of the most competitive programs in the country. And that's okay. You choose based on, ultimately what's best for you and what fits. And I think, it's going to get to a point where that's the norm, and we can sort of differentiate what programs can do every thing that we talked about, while also not demeaning different programs for not being able to compete at the highest level or things like that. So I heavily agree with that. I think ultimately we're going to see a lot more differentiation when it comes to priorities within programs.
It'll fall a lot like traditional athletics does for other sports,
Mm-hmm.
where certain schools are good for certain things,
right?
And certain schools offer certain experiences for players.
One of the things that I thought was interesting that I've seen before is esports directors talking about, this student's not right for my school, but I do know a school that they're right for.
Right.
That's me.
Yeah, that was you. And I just thought, like, as someone who has not even gotten to the point of recruiting students, I said, wow, that's amazing. Like, I'm really grateful that that's a space that we have in collegiate esports, that we feel comfortable enough, suggesting that maybe we're not the best place for this student, but we want, the student comes first.
And that's part of the weird line I
important.
walk. That's part of the weird line I walk with high school and collegiate, where a lot of high school students know me still and reach out to me like, hey, do you have ideas for this university? Do you have connections here and here and here? I had one student who I directed him to 10 schools but mine. And I'm like, if you find a home in collegiate, I don't care. That's fantastic. Great. Please find a space. I'm happy to support you. I wrote a letter of rec for a kid to a different school. Not even mine, just a different college entirely while I'm here on Wesleyan letterhead, which felt really weird.
All right. Thank you all so much for that. Lydia, where do you see the collegiate esports space heading in 3 to 5 years? And if there was a part of collegiate esports you can change the most during this time, what would you change, especially with the level that the ECAC is growing into? They are probably one of the biggest competitions in collegiate right now.
Yeah, so I think, right now we're seeing a lot of investment, and obviously there needs to be more. I think which you all touched on greatly and had great points on is more investment from the schools and the universities into the programs, and it doesn't even have to be money like right off the bat. It can be just listening to the students or a staff member that comes to the athletic department. I mean, I've had students that go to their athletic department or whoever, an upper admin, and they won't even entertain the thought of video games, which is it's very upsetting. So I think that definitely needs to change. And I think it's like with esports programs and how great a lot of esports programs are, they're all great. Like, it's kind of like a help us help you for each school with enrollment and social media. I mean, SUNY Canton is definitely a good example of they haven't, when they started their program, they can tell you that the opening the esports program in the arena created the most social media buzz that they've ever seen, just on campus. So I think that, more investment needs to be made, like as you all touched on, within the next, couple of years. Definitely. It's very, like, the investment just in that, and, the programs that are already established. Like Caitlin said, there's a coach who also does a lot of many things and wears different hats, but they also probably work another job as well. So seeing programs have a full-on staffing, administration, social media, a lot of, like you said, Caitlin, there's going to be a lot of a head coach for Rocket League, a head coach for Valorant. A lot of that, I think, needs to be made within the next couple of years.
All right, sick. Thank you so much. So at this point, I'm going to direct any question and answer segments. If there's any super in-depth questions anybody in chat wants to talk about, let us know. I think that it's a great time to just maybe get a little bit more perspective if you want a little bit more info touched on. We did have one question pop up earlier in the chat. I'm going to open this up to anybody. If you feel like your expertise can answer this, feel free to do so. This is from Jamie_Bell. How do you bridge the cost of the entry gap, PC, console, etc.? And are you looking into mobile gaming in this space?
I would love to start us off on this question, if that's okay.
Go right ahead.
So this is something that we talk about a lot at St. Mary's, is the monetary barrier to entry into college esports. And that, number one, it exists. And number two, it's pretty high, and it oftentimes disproportionately affects certain groups of people. As a private school, it's sometimes an oxymoron about, well, what are you going to do about the monetary barrier to entry when it's kind of just a fact that private schools are more expensive. So we had this conversation really early on, and being realistic that we're not going to solve this overnight. But again, we can start with the stepping stones to getting there. One of the few things that we've started is the scholarships that we do offer are often going to be given out on a need basis for our students. So those who may need, that $1,000 to cover their student health care, because we live in athletics, all of our players are student athletes and they have to have insurance. If they don't have insurance already, then they can buy it through the school, but that's an additional cost that they weren't accounting for. So that's one way we'll help bridge the gap. The other way is being really intentional with the games we decide to offer within our program as a varsity team. For example, we recently brought on Halo as a junior varsity team. In the fall, we're going to make it a full-fledged varsity team. But the reason we picked Halo was because it's cross-platform. And we chose Halo over Valorant for that reason alone, that it's accessible to more students. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be cheaper for everybody, but we can cast a wider net when we want to bring in more people to our program. So again, when we talk about that barrier to entry, those are the things we consider is how can we help, even if it's just a little bit, even if this percentage of our scholarships goes to help with those financial burdens, or the games that we include, like, are they, can more people enjoy these games? And then the last thing is working with the local high schools of all demographics, private, public, and seeing where we can lend ourselves as a resource, whether that be, hey, let us, open our doors for a tour or what have you, or during our summer esports camps, having, a set amount be for, a discounted rate for those who may not be able to afford it. Because I feel like summer camps are something that everyone should be able to enjoy. So again, going back to the original point, we're probably not going to solve this overnight, but we can make those small steps to help bridge the gap. And of course, we're always looking for more feedback. We're always looking for more ideas because it is something that we hold close to our heart.
From my perspective on that question, because we are a distance school, like there's no, land center or anything like that on campus that students are going to have access to. So I have had students ask me, like, do you provide anything? Do I have to have my own machine, whatever? And when I talk to them and I say, where do you live? I can look up local libraries. I can look up local gaming centers. Like maybe our playtimes will line up with availability there. There are libraries that will, allow you to essentially sign out gaming consoles, see if you can participate in that kind of a thing. So I think it's useful not only to be looking at, is there a fund that we have that we can provide people for, but also tune in and tap into your local resources. Maybe there's something that you wouldn't otherwise be thinking about.
Yeah, I think I could touch on this heavily. I've been fortunate enough to, when I graduated, to been working with Ryan Johnson and the crew over at Community. And one of the primary initiatives that we've done over the past few couple of years is making sure that we try to bridge the gap between HBCUs and esports organizations, because typically like you said, that barrier, that technological barrier within esports is so heavy that a lot of times these HBCU students are, reaching out to their administrators and saying, "Hey, we kind of want to do esports. Is there any way we can get a lab?" They laugh it off, right? And it is not even a possibility for schools like that, like it is for a private school like Ottawa. And so, I think supporting initiatives like that is super important. And then going along with what Caitlin said earlier, of making sure that as a collegiate esports entity, you don't get so caught up in, okay, this is collegiate. Let me just tunnel vision, focus on my teams, focus on my program. You have a duty to support high school entities, and whether that be something small like a mentorship program, and getting your students out there to coach, or to just be a mentor and help guide those students to get into collegiate esports, or whether you're opening your facilities like Caitlin talked about before. We open our facility for the Ottawa high school group did not have an avenue or opportunity to compete in things like HSEL or play versus, because they just didn't have the technology. And so we open our doors for those students to play their league matches and have practices within our facility, and they absolutely love it, and it like makes their world. We have parents come in all the time and say, you just made my son or daughter's day by letting them just come in and play for a few hours, right? So I think ultimately you're super important. And I think, like I said before, a lot of times, this is a hard job, and it's hard not to tunnel vision because a lot of us are doing it on our own. But even if you can take, an hour out of your day to dedicate to, high schools, just how you can build those relationships a little bit more, I think you'll start to see that, that barrier sort of dwindle a little bit in terms of, your outreach.
Speaking to the facility usage stuff as well, part of it as well is like I said, getting the high schools involved in this facility. So far this year, I've had a local high school in here 4 times. I've had 2 cross-state rivals play their final match of the season in our space. It was a giant pizza party plus playing matches. We hosted the state finals for Rocket League, top 8 there. We're hosting state finals for Rocket League for the state esports or state sports league. That's top 16. Just offering the space to as many groups on campus as possible. Because while I have this awesome facility, let's use it for more than just me. So I want to get more people involved. Even when we had like other schools here. When 66 Games was in town, our friends from Harrisburg were flying into play, and they wanted a place to do their match prep and VOD reviews and practice for the 4 days of the event. I gave them a room in our space and said, "Go use it. It's yours." And I got them with temporary IDs. They could get in there all they want, and just being more open and welcoming people like this is, I think, a really important part of esports.
All right. Awesome. Lydia, do you have anything input?
Oh yeah, I was
Go
just
ahead.
gonna add that as a league, we see the barriers that a lot of programs and students face. So we try our best to adopt the titles that are free to play and cross-platform, where students can, even if they're not even able to go on campus, they can play from home, from any device.
All right. Sick. Mr. Purple Subs. Applying heavily for jobs and haven't had much positive results. So I was wondering what steps I should be taking to find a job in collegiate esports or esports in general.
Stalk Hitmarker, first of all. Like, just browse Hitmarker 24/7 and find things.
Retweet.
Second, get active on Twitter. It's like where most of the space lives. Just follow a bajillion people. I see job postings all the time because I follow 1,600 people. And so just find communities on space and just reach out and make connections. The fun or not fun of the industry right now is that it's still who you know and connections through who you know. So just be a genuinely nice person and you'll know more people. It's pretty simple as that.
Yeah, there are strikingly few jobs that are, and open to, anyone posting in collegiate esports specifically. Esports, there's a ton, but if you're looking to get involved in collegiate esports, there's usually a lot of, internal, they're hiring their grassroots people. It's only when somebody leaves that you're going to get a new position. So it's about building the relationships and building the community, and then also proving that you have done that. Unfortunately, it is all in Twitter. I'm not very good on Twitter. If you went to my Twitter right now, you'd see where I said, "Hey, I'm very new to this, and I've got double the followers in the last week than I had previously." So I'm learning all about Twitter and esports right now. But yeah, I would also say push out of your comfort zone. Like, I have to go and learn Twitter. Oops. But also, reach out to people, get involved. Like, it seems like an intimidating space, but in my experience, the last 10 to 15 years in collegiate esports people are pretty chill most of the time.
And just getting involved, I'll retweet that as well. Getting involved is the biggest thing. Just stick your hand up and do something.
Yeah.
I do enough that I get told I can't volunteer for things anymore, but still, like, volunteering for stuff new and old, it will always get you friends and people who can connect you in the space.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, like, this is a space where a lot of people feel like they can't reach out and just ask to have a one-on-one about your experiences. You can learn a lot about how you should go about your job search by just listening to people's experiences about how they got into collegiate esports. I've had people reach out to me and say, "Hey, do you have time to sit with me on Zoom for 15 minutes and just talk about your journey and, just, talk about the steps that I should take, to get to that point?" And I think so often we think that, coaches and directors are in our shell. We don't care about other programs, don't care about other people. That's the farthest, from the truth. Sure, you might have some directors that you strike out on and they're like, "Yeah, I just don't have time," or "I don't really care to," or you just don't get a response at all. And that's fine, right? But I can guarantee you every single person in this call will be willing to sit down with you and say, sit down and talk about our journeys, how we got to the points that we're at. And then by doing that, you also gain another reference, right? So if, usually when there's like state positions that open up at these different, institutions, the first people to know are the other neighboring institutions that already have esports programs. So if I'm in Kansas City and there's another school that opens up a position and me and you have just talked about how you have this journey and that you want to get to this point, you're the first person I'm going to think, "Oh man, I should really reach out to this person and send them the application and tell them to, reach out and apply for the job." So I would definitely start by just reaching out to more people and just having those one-on-ones and seeing, the difference in people's journeys and how they got to where they are. Because I think, that's an underrated way to learn a lot about the process and what you should be doing.
It's harder to get us to stop talking about collegiate esports and getting involved than it is to start talking.
Right, for sure.
Absolutely. And message me too. We're always, any opportunity that we can help with, even if it's the direction that you don't end up wanting to work with us and you want to do something else, branch out into something else. We always offer internships. I have an army of interns each semester. So the door's always open.
Yeah, sweet. I mean, DM like quite literally everybody here. Like, I think anyone would love to have a conversation. Next, how do mentorships, internships, and other similar opportunities being provided mentorships, internships, and other similar opportunities being provided in the esports space? It could be from your program or from even your personal experiences if you are in that position.
Yeah, I think most of the time I see it, at least in the collegiate space, is usually within tournament operations and league operations of different entities. There's so many of these entities that are looking, just like Lydia just said, even with ECAC, they're looking for, young, hungry people that really want to work hard and get their foot in the door. And I think a lot of times those internships, a lot of people look at it and are like, "Oh, it's an internship. It's beneath me. I don't want to do it. It's not going to get me anywhere." But contrary to popular belief, like every single piece of experience you can gain in this space is ultimately going to benefit you. It's going to benefit your network, going to benefit the relationships you build with other people, and it's going to build, your resume ultimately if you're trying to get deeper into the space. So I think, the best way to look at it is to go through those tournament and league operations internship opportunities, because that's where it's the most abundant right now, at least in collegiate. A lot of times you're not going to see, a lot of programs don't have, internships and things like that. Unfortunately, we just don't have the resources for it, in collegiate right now. But those league operations people are definitely going to be your best friends in that regard.
And even if you think you're not perfectly qualified for something, just go for it still. What's the worst they can say? No? I threw out 20 applications to get hired as a teacher. I heard back from 2 of them. It's the reality of job hunting, especially now. It is just throw your name out there, and if you're confident in what you want to do, you can get involved and do it. It's just you have to turn over every stone.
Especially because esports is so young. One of the things that I learned from my first boss on my first job when I was 19, and I use it the whole way, is you can teach a great person how to do something, but you can't teach a skilled person how not to be a jerk. I will take someone who has the passion, the drive, and the baseline understanding and mold them into something great than to take some, stereotypical jerk who, actually knows everything and I can't work alongside.
Retweet.
Yeah, from my experience, starting as an intern to now, Dan, our commissioner, really saw, the drive that I had, doing, and it really did start with the tournament adminning, which branched into also me doing social media and graphics as well. And he really saw that, and I think that was really a turning key, where he saw my drive and my passion and kept me on board, and now, hired me full time. And now I hired. She was an intern for us. Haley Parks was an intern for us, and now she is working with us as well. So, the internships most likely lead to, a full-time or part-time job, or even just experience for your next opportunity.
Very true. Very true. We have 2 more questions. So the second to last question, with the premise that viewership is ultimately going to heavily drive cash flows, what can we do to increase viewership and engagement outside of the competitors? Anybody with production, event hosting, if you do anything like that, can feel free to chime in on that.
I think number one, storylines. There's not enough in collegiate. Back to the tunnel vision thing that I talked about before, and I'm guilty of it too, just as much as anybody. But being so headstrong or your program, when in actuality there's so many different friendly rivalries that you can build, and different storylines that you can build to make people want to come out and watch your games. There's not a lot of, unless you're a student or your child goes to a certain school, there's not a lot of interest outside of collegiate esports. A lot of parents aren't tuning in for the storylines, they're tuning in because, oh, my son's playing, so now I'm going to sit here for this 30-minute Rocket League match. And the next CRL game, who cares? Even if it has playoff implications that can lead to ultimately affecting your child, the interest just isn't there. So I think storylines is definitely something that we can do a little bit better. I also think building the letting people know that your students have personality through your content creation is another big thing too. I think a lot of times you can't even tell what the players look like or the diversity within a program because it's not on display a lot of times. And so it's hard for me to root for a blank face. I see LeBron James every day playing basketball, so of course I can root for LeBron because I can identify with him, right? It should be the same for your collegiate players. And I think focusing more on the content creation side of things, and showing the personality that a lot of these players have, which even though we're gamers and we live in a show, a lot of these players have crazy personalities, and they're so different, and they come from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, even at this point. And so I think it's super important that we start to let that personality shine through. And I think it's ultimately going to benefit, our viewership and benefit, the buy-in for esports at different institutions once they start to see that viewership go up even more.
And I do want to second the point on personality and just getting player personality across, because parents will see that and just get involved, and people outside your program will see that and get involved. If they just know your players, like for us at the tournament we played in July, our mid laner turned 18 the day of the tournament. And that was a storyline we could use in content and marketing. and that kind of thing. And there's programs out there who do a great job telling stories about their students. I do want to call out Caitlin, actually, for doing a really good job of that with her program, especially for Women's History Month.
Yeah, I just to touch on that a little bit, that was one of our social campaigns that our social media student staff worked on. And the big goal for that campaign was highlighting the person behind the screen, like who are they outside of esports, because we have a lot of very, very intelligent and interesting people in our program. And, sometimes that kind of goes unlooked. Like, for example, one of our student leaders is also the student government president. We have graduate students in our program. We have students that are involved in other parts of campus. And the whole point of the campaign, of course, was, yes, highlighting the women in our program, but also more than just the individual as a player or the individual as student staff. Like, there's so much more to it. So it's one thing that we're really, really proud about. And this campaign is going to run through the end of the month. We have 18 women to highlight in our program.
Nice.
Telling the stories is definitely key, especially, as I mentioned, our school is, entirely online. So our students don't really interact much, like, at all. We don't have a campus life because there's no campus. So it's, you log in, you post your 3 sentences, you respond to somebody and say, wow, that was a great point, and then you log out. With esports, suddenly they're interacting with other students to the extent that 2 of our students who did not know each other beforehand met up last summer in person and hung out and are like BFFs now. And like, I've got the picture of them hanging out, and every single time that it comes up, I'm like, look at these girls, they're amazing, they're friends now, oh my god, everything about esports is awesome. And it's like, that's the driving thing that I bring up when people ask me about the school and esports and ask me, what is esports contributing. I'm like, this picture right here, this is everything to us.
Yeah. So closing this out, do you find it difficult to recruit because parents do not understand esports? This could be like lower level freshmen, or maybe you even have some like seniors in your program where the parents are like, I don't understand esports. I know my parents were like that at one point. So do you have any like answer it? Like, do you find it difficult? Do you have any responses to like, these players that say, oh, my parents really don't understand it. Like, I don't know if I can play, how do you feel?
So I have a strong feeling on this one from teaching high school, where I had to convince parents to let my players be on my team because this was the after school activity. I had Timmy playing instead of football. I had football coaches complain to me that I was taking their players.
Oh wow.
That was a fun conversation to have, honestly.
Oh.
But like, getting parents on board is just having a genuine conversation about the benefits of esports, because we as endemics know the benefits and don't have to talk about them. We can just think and go, yeah, it's fine. But for parents, we have to explicitly discuss those and explain them ad nauseum just to get it across. And then going to collegiate, a lot of times we're talking only to students first and then see their parents way after. And so the student may already be committed. And I have to get the parents on board saying, hey, you're paying for this. In some cases. And so once again, it's just having this conversation about the genuine benefits of esports, from community, from communication. I had a conversation with parents recently from one of my players saying that he came out of his shell so much through esports, and while being at the university, he's done so much more, and so on and so on and so on, about how much they've changed. And having invested parents like that who care is great. We can't all have that for every player. And so having those success stories, I think, highlighted will also help programs. So once again, showing personality and story and background of players will highlight the benefits more than just us reading off a list.
I actually have like an opposite but similar story, or series of stories, really. SUNY Empire is, I've mentioned, it's all online, but it's mostly geared towards returning students or adult first-time learners. So I get emails saying, hey, I'm a student, my kid's really into gaming, can you explain this to me? So, you've got, like the 40 and 50-year-old first-time students at the school that, yeah, they don't really care about esports, but they see esports, they're familiar with it because of their, 10, 14-year-old kid. And then they email me, and then I just have these conversations where it's like, I get into explaining like Minecraft is not an esport, but let's talk about gaming kind of a thing. And, or they'll ask me about Overwatch or whatever. So, and, in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, the more I do now, the more it saves someone else later, and maybe it pushes this kid like, hey, there's probably high school esports leagues that your kid might be interested in. Like, this would be a great bonding experience for the two of you, kind of a thing. It's that pipeline we talked about, and it's interesting to be on that side of the pipeline.
Yeah, I think usually when I approach conversations with parents, a lot of times I try to make it as personable as possible, and it's hard to do over the phone and over Zoom. I see usually the most success. Unfortunately, everybody doesn't have a facility, to call home that they can show parents, but usually, you bring a parent into the esports facility and show this serious thing, and they do a complete 180, like, whoa, like sign me up right now, we're committed, let's do it, and I think it's just a matter of letting them know that this is something that your school takes seriously. And also letting them know that, I think a big stigma that parents have of video games, of course, is, we live in a show, we don't interact, even though they may hear us communicating online, they don't think that's actual communication and, actual relationship building. And so showing them, I even let some of the parents talk to some of my students and ask them questions, right, whenever they come to visit, so they can know from a student perspective how the esports program has benefited them on their journey so far through college. And I think that's something that's super important, is, highlighting the aspects of your school and the benefits of esports beyond just the fact that, oh, they can, play for our school and possibly win scholarship money. That's cool and all, but that's not going to move parents ultimately when they're thinking about their kids' college education. And so I think, making esports be the topic of conversation, but finding ways to branch that off into benefits of collegiate esports as a whole and the benefit of, coming to your school in general is something that's super important. It goes a long way when trying to communicate with parents ultimately.
All right. I think that is everything. Thank you all so much for coming out, for speaking, answering these questions. It was so much fun getting everybody's different perspective on these lingering, pros and cons of collegiate esports, even branching into the high school space, which is, essentially the collegiate future is, these like middle schoolers, high schoolers, the younger ones growing into the space. And, it's interesting getting these perspectives, and it's so much fun hearing everyone feel so passionate and educated on this particular topic. And it's always a joy to listen to everyone talk. And I love that part. Thank you all so much for coming out, asking questions, participating with us. That is it for our two-part series for the state of collegiate esports. Be sure to follow everyone on their socials. Their social handles are underneath all their webcams. So make sure you go follow them, hit them up, engage. And make sure to follow LeagueSpot GG on Twitter for whenever we announce our next event. Thank you all so much for watching.